For vegans and vegetarians, many of those plant-based sources don't have all 9 essential amino acids. They might need to actually consume even more protein than the average woman. All proteins and foods are not created the same. I also think whenever we're talking about food, it can become a very charged conversation very quickly. And I think the reason why is that
people are trying to find the holy grail of health. And then on the other side, there's cultural identity, personal identity. And so I bring that up because vegans don't see this as a diet. They see it as a lifestyle.
There are other topics in the health and wellness space where people are okay with letting the experts weigh in, but everyone thinks they're an expert because we all eat.
Liz Plosser is the founder of the Best Case Scenario Substack, a wellness playbook helping people feel a little better today than they did yesterday.
She is the former editor-in-chief of Women's Health, where she oversaw the brand for 7 years across its print and digital platforms and various brand extensions, reaching a monthly audience of 44+ million.
A veteran of the wellness industry, she has held senior strategy and content roles at Well Plus Good, Soul Cycle, Self, and Cosmopolitan. She appears regularly as a speaker and is a frequent guest on national television and podcasts.
Liz is the author of the book, Own Your Morning, Reset Your AM to Unlock Your Potential.
How can women navigate the space to know what is just true as they're presented with these wild trends, not only from magazines, but social media influencers?
There is some research out there, to your point about it's different for men and women. Physiologically, women do better.
Welcome back to the Dr. Brighten Show. I'm your host, Dr. Jolene Brighten. I'm board certified in naturopathic endocrinology, a nutrition scientist, a certified sex counselor, and a certified menopause specialist. As always, I'm bringing you the latest, most up-to-date information to help you take charge of your health and take back your hormones. If you enjoy this kind of information, I invite you to visit my website, drbrighten.com, where I have a ton of free resources for you, including a newsletter that brings you some of the best information, including updates on this podcast. Now, as always, this information is brought to you cost-free, and because of that, I have to say thank you to my sponsors for making this possible. It's my aim to make sure that you can have all the tools and resources in your hands and that we end the gatekeeping. And in order to do that, I do have to get support for this podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I know your time is so valuable and so important, and it's not lost on me that you're sharing it with me right now. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, or share this with a friend because it helps this podcast get out to everyone who needs it. All right, let's dive in.
Liz Plosser joining me in the Ozarks at Big Cedar Lodge. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm loving your cabin.
I know. It's such an interesting background to have for a podcast. I'm I feel so rustic. I needed plaid. I feel like I didn't get the plaid memo.
We should have plaid blankets over our laps right now.
Totally. Oh, well, I'm super excited for today's conversation. You are former editor for Women's Health magazine, and I'm curious, what is life for you looking like now? You left the magazine after so many years.
Yeah, so I've been a health journalist almost my entire career. I'm 46 now, so that's more than a couple decades. And most recently, I was editor-in-chief of Women's Health, overseeing the brand across all of the platforms. So we still have a print publication, but that included digital and commerce and memberships and licensing and video. It was a dream job. I absolutely loved it. I got to meet people like you and go to really cool summits around the world. I had an amazing team. But after 7 years, I just felt like I had made the maximum impact I could at that brand and learned so much, but probably was too good and comfortable in the role. So I'd been thinking for a while about taking my skills and experiences and building something new for myself. So just a few years into life on my own, still very much in the health and wellness space. Now I'm consulting for a few different brands, and I get to come to amazing retreats like this to speak and lead classes. And I also immediately started writing my own Substack called Best Case Scenario, which doesn't pay the bills, but is so much fun. And I am starting a podcast in a couple months. So I'm keeping busy.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. The Substack, what do you primarily write about?
So it's called Best Case Scenario, and that's a phrase I use all the time. And the point of it is to be a place of Optimism and Action. There's so much, as you know, information about health and fitness and nutrition topics out there, many of them quite polarized and negative. And so I wanted to surface the good stuff and go really deep on it and help readers learn something new and hopefully go down some more rabbit holes after they finish reading one of my posts. So I post twice a week. The first one is on Mondays. And first I share some personal story. Probably I'll be writing about this experience on Monday. And then I do a big lengthy roundup of links, just new studies and stories and trends and just interesting things I'm seeing across this space. I've always loved reading and been curious to hear what brands are up to, what people are founding and looking for trends. But they weren't always applicable to our women's health audience. So we would bat them around in Slack, but it was important to find the point of view that made sense for that brand. But now I'm the brand, so I get to write about whatever I want to. I do a second post later in the week, which is a deep dive. I'm trained as a science-backed, evidence-based journalist, so that's been really fun to do reporting again. As you get higher in your career, perhaps you've experienced this, you do less of the thing that brought you to it in the first place, which in my case is writing. So it's been really fun to write stories and interview experts and find studies and then put it all together, press publish, and watch people respond in the comments and ask more questions. It's been really cool.
What do you think is the most exciting health trend or up-and-coming practice of 2025 you've seen so far?
I am so happy about the rise of strength training for women. And as somebody who has covered the fitness space for decades and written so many stories and so many cover lines about exercise and fitness, I have just noticed that women are ready, I think. And I continue to be on a mission, if they're not ready, to help them get there, to do more lifting of weights. And I think the world is waking up to the fact that women, particularly in midlife, really need that. It's more important than ever to protect or even build your lean muscle mass. It's super important for bone density and just for your body chemistry and mental and emotional state as our hormones are fluctuating. So I've been really heartened to see that. It's a big thing we did at Women's Health. There used to be a lot more stories about cardio and a lot more stories focused on calorie burn. I don't even look at how many calories I burn during a workout. And most of my workouts are strength-based these days. So it's really cool to see the momentum in strength training.
Why do you think it took until 2025 for strength training in women's health to have its moment? Because you're right. It was a lot of cardio. It was low weight, tone your body, and a lot of focus on earn what you eat, make sure that you're always burning enough calories every day. I'm curious, two things. So why did it take so long, and what was the pivotal moment, what that made everything change?
I think that I was part of the problem as a younger journalist because we thought that's what women wanted to hear. I still cringe thinking about a story I pitched when I worked at Self magazine back in my 20s, and it was called The Big Cost of Little Bites. And I remember it so vividly. I was so proud because it got greenlit and I reported it. And it was literally like a list with science about how we mindlessly grab handfuls of goldfish and finish our kids' plates, all of which is true. And if you're, thinking about your body composition, of course, it's important to be thoughtful about that. But it was a way of judgment and shame and making food feel like this bad thing that you had to earn or you had to go immediately burn off. How many times I saw those graphs that were like, one chocolate chip equals this many minutes on the treadmill.
I know.
So, gosh, I think part of the issue was that was just hardwired into our psyche, essentially. The media continued to publish those stories, and then millions of women read them, and then they talked to their children about them. So we just developed generation after generation of women who were obsessed with calorie burn and how many calories were in everything they were eating. As you know, strength training isn't necessarily going to burn as many calories. Probably it's not.
Yeah.
But it has so many benefits in terms of your basal metabolic rate and the afterburn effect. It does so much goodness that your tracker cannot accurately measure, calorie for calorie compared to going for a run. So the to answer the second part of your question, what was the inflection point? You know, I would like to think that women's health was part of that. I made a conscious effort with the team to start doing more stories about strength training. And we retired words like sculpting and toning, no shade to anybody who still uses those words, but I think they imply sort of like a softness and a gentleness. And our bodies actually need to work hard, and we need to push ourselves outside of the comfort zone when we're working out. That's where change happens, and that's what helps us stay healthier. So I won't say women's health took, I won't take all responsibility for that, but I do think and hope we were trailblazers, and that it's helped change that conversation.
It's interesting that you're like, there's a softness to sculpting, because I like the word sculpting, but I think about like hammering on a hard rock and like you chisel it out. And like, I've thought of sculpting that way. And then I'm like, when you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, like malleable clay, like, and I hadn't really thought about the words in that way and what they imply. And I think that part of that toning language also lent itself to like, you don't want to get bulky, which that has been something I think in the last like 5-10 years we've really had to combat, is this idea that you're going to get bulky. And you'll see women who do get bulky and they're usually on testosterone, HRT, and that's what their aim is to get bulky, do these fitness competitions. But if you actually talk to them, it's a full-time job. Like, you're not going to be able, the average person isn't going to be able to, one, keep up with how much you have to eat to make that happen, and two, be able to put in that much time at the gym. I'm curious, what do you see right now that you're like, this is still missing in this whole strength training conversation? We haven't touched this yet. We haven't gone deep enough yet, or women are still confused about this?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with you. This fear of getting bulky and turning into a Hulk because you start picking up weights at the gym.
But She-Hulk looks amazing, so I don't know.
But you're right. For somebody to get bulky and for a woman to develop that type of musculature, it's a full-time job. They have to work so hard. They have to have their diet dialed in to build that type of muscle. For the average woman, lifting heavier is going to make you look, quote unquote, what you think toning looks like.
Yeah.
I also love how you reframe sculpting, that we're malleable, because we are changing beings, and we can definitely change our body composition, which is one of the awesome things about our body. I think something that's missing now, women, I think, are open to the strength training conversation. The level up will be when they start pushing themselves to lift heavier. And that's very related to what we're talking about, that it's not okay to just say, well, I'm glad if you're going to the gym 2 to 3 times a week. That's an awesome start. And I don't want you to do this right out of the gates. But if you're a beginner, once you get comfortable with the weight, that means it's time to go up a little bit. And so I hope to push that conversation forward. I also never want to demonize forms of cardio. I know a lot of people love running. I used to be a marathoner. For many years, I couldn't get that endorphin high, that sense of clarity like I could unless I went running. And to sort of take it back to what I think is missing or where we're going, I only learned how to feel that way and get that sense of, I feel so good once I started lifting heavier at the gym. So yeah, lifting heavier, pushing your body, so good for your lean muscle mass. And I really do believe that as more women get comfortable and as we continue talking about it, that we're going to get there.
Let's get more specific with lifting heavier, because you've said that a couple of times. And if someone isn't strength training or they're new to it, they might be like, so what does that mean? Does that mean like going as heavy as possible every single time? Can you break down what you mean in that?
Absolutely. So full disclosure, I led a body weight workout while we've been here at this retreat. I led one yesterday and today. You can absolutely stimulate your muscles with body weight. You can get a great workout. You just have to be really intentional about it. There's a few different ways to create that volume. That's that muscle stimulus we're working on. One way is if you're going lighter or you're using body weight, you're going to have to do a lot of reps, and you're going to have to do them with that mind-body focus. Once your body adjusts to that, it's time to level up. And that means picking up a weight that feels outside of your comfort zone, that makes you look at it and go, ooh, I don't know. And when you do pick up that weight, And please adjust, slowly. I'm not asking you to go from 0 to 100. Actually, don't do that. That's a recipe for injury and burnout.
Squats, we like to keep our knees. We want to keep our low back. We want to keep our
right.
pelvic floor.
And I think that's a really important point. When I say lift heavy, I mean something that puts you out of your comfort zone, but that you still have perfect form, that you're keeping your body safe, that you're in alignment, nothing should hurt. You should be doing the move the way it's meant to be done. But yeah, we need to pick up heavier weights and know that doesn't mean, okay, today I'm doing 10 pounds. That means the day after tomorrow, I got to do 15 and then the next day, 25. It takes longer. You're probably going to be in a specific zone, lifting a certain amount of weight in a move for about 6 weeks. And then ideally you would step back. It's called deloading. Let your body sort of recover. You can go a little lighter. And maybe a little shorter in your workouts. And then you pick that cycle back up. And then in the next 6-week segment, try and go a little heavier. So that's what I mean. That's where the magic happens. That's how our bodies change, makes us healthier from the inside out.
When it comes to how you eat to support your workouts, was that a focus at Women's Health magazine? Do you feel like in the origins, in the beginning of when you were there, or did that evolve over time?
I think that was an evolution. That was not really something that was happening when I arrived. We really, we had different ways of talking about food. At first, that section of the magazine where we talk about food was called nutrition. By the end, we had renamed it fuel, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So we really thought about food as a way to fuel your life. And that means your workouts. That means showing up as a mom. Showing up for your job every day and just, really being at 100% of wherever you're meant to be that day. The conversation around food and working out, oh my goodness, how long do you have? I can really geek out over it.
Yeah, well, no, I love to get that science perspective, that journalist perspective, because as you had started this, you were like, this is if you eat a cookie, you're going to be on the treadmill for this long, stair stepper for this long. And I think that a lot of these, and when I say Women's Health magazines, I mean broadly, not just Women's Health. In a lot of ways, Women's Health, I think, has done a lot more positive things than, I'm going to drag you, Cosmo. I'm going to drag you. You've had some problems. Everything's about pleasing a man, looking good for a man. It's had a negative psychological impact on us. And so that's why I'm curious about this. And I would love for you to take that deep dive and get a little nerdy with us.
Okay, let's nerd out over fueling for your workouts. So I actually just wrote a Substack about this topic. And I would say the answer is complicated and nuanced, as many answers are to these health questions. But in an ideal world, yes, you would eat something before your workout. Because if you arrive at the gym or you're doing your workout at home and you get hungry in the middle of it, you're going to fatigue faster and you're not going to be able to give as much effort. There's nothing I hate more than when I start to feel that, when I'm mid-workout. Having said that, there is balance, right? I'm somebody who works out very early in the morning and I'm just simply not hungry, nor do I have enough time to digest a breakfast before I work out. And that is okay too. I think people really need to experiment with what works best in their life and what sets them up to feel their best when they are lifting or running or whatever it might be. I think what's more important to focus on, and perhaps a little more in our control, is what you eat after you work out. And, there's some really cool studies about, this window of about 30 minutes to an hour after your workout when your muscles are like little sponges ready to soak up all that good for you protein. So I try to eat as quickly as possible after I finished at the gym. I usually make myself a protein shake. So, I put some fruit and some milk and protein powder in and really just give my body what it needs in that moment. However, there is also research that suggests that you have about 3 hours in that window. Now, the maximum effects, yes, get something in your body as quickly as you can, but you can wait a little. You can wait. You're going to be okay. The benefits are you can wait. It's still good for you if you're eating within 3 hours of working out. So the most important thing is actually, and I know you geek out over this too, getting some protein in your body, and your muscles are primed for it.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you bringing up the importance of these eating windows, because in the age of fasting, especially as we see so many men pushing extreme fasting and telling women, like, of course it works for you. It works for me. It has to work for you. I made a comment in another podcast that I was like, in these health trends, when men lead, women often fail. And then they feel like failures, but it's because one physiological system is demanding that you act and behave like it, but that's just not how you're designed. And so I think it's just really important to bring up, I'm definitely, because I've been in nutrition for so long, I am definitely conditioned to that 30-minute window, because that used to be the absolute gold standard of getting in your complete protein. So let's talk about that. Why does complete protein matter? What is it? Right, because I brought it up. People might not know.
Yeah, so complete protein is when you're eating something that has all 9 of the essential amino acids. And those are the ones that your body cannot make on their own. So you have to get it from food or from a supplement. And that is when the magic happens in your body. That's what your body needs in order to do protein synthesis. And when protein synthesis happens in your body, it's helping every part of your body, from your immune system to your brain, to your muscles. It's literally a cascading effect everywhere. So I love that more women are focused on protein. I love that conversation has become so much bigger. My concern is that all proteins and foods are not created the same. And particularly for vegans and vegetarians, many of those plant-based sources don't have all 9 essential amino acids. So they might need to actually consume even more protein than the average woman. Or they just need to get more strategic about combining foods to make sure that they've got all 9. I will say it gets easier once you start tracking and observing. This is not something that's gonna, take up brain space forever and ever. Honestly, when I started focusing on protein, which was only a few years ago, I've been on my own protein journey. It took about 2 weeks of looking at nutrition labels. I did use a food scale for a while. I used an app. You can use ChatGPT. You can quickly learn how much protein is in various common foods. And you can also very quickly learn if they contain all 9 essential amino acids.
Well, since you brought up vegan and vegetarian, I was a vegetarian for 10 years. During the time, I was to say I was a group fitness instructor, and you were like, I can't always eat in the morning. I was a 5:30 a.m. class. Like, there's no waking up my gut at 4 o'clock in the morning. Like, I feel like my digestive tract is not online until 7 a.m. And anything before that, I'm like, it's got to be like easy. So I think that was an important point I want to highlight for people, is that the ideal is that we do eat before. However, if it's really early in the morning, like, your gut might not be ready for it. And sometimes people are like, if I eat that early and I work out, I have an upset stomach. And it's like, obey the laws of your physiology and listen to that.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I always tell people to experiment. Experiment with going into your workout in a fed state. So you have put some calories and good for you macronutrients into your body. There is some research out there. To your point about it's different for men and women, physiologically, women do better working out in a fed state.
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of conversation around, well, if I sweat when I'm fasted, I'm burning more fat. Well, the truth is, your best workout and the best fat burning workout and the best for you workout is when you feel your best. So if you're fatiguing and lacking energy, that's a problem. But if you're in the gym and you're having digestive troubles, that's awful. That's going to cut your workout short too. So people need to experiment with themselves. And I work out by 6 a.m. on the dot when the gym opens. And like you, I'm not hungry, and my body doesn't want any food then.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to what I was going to say about vegan and vegetarian. So I was a vegetarian, but my master's research was in sarcopenic obesity and leveraging branched-chain amino acids. And I am so glad because it made me super diligent about protein and counting protein. And as you were saying, like, it doesn't take that much time. But once you start to wrap your head around, like, how much protein is in things, like, it just becomes second nature. You were saying, like, don't count calories. I'm really on board with that. I've never been a calorie counter except when I was, like, forced to in nutrition school, and they're like, how many calories are you consuming a day? But protein is something, and fiber, if you do not track them, odds are you're not getting enough of them. But for vegans and vegetarians, what should they know about branched chain amino acids? I mean, everybody should know about these, but certainly for vegans and vegetarians.
Branched chain amino acids, more attention on these, which is fantastic. The trick is for vegans and vegetarians, they're not so common in those foods. So as somebody who eats meat, that's, something that I'm getting from those sources, whether it's a lean chicken breast or various lean meats.
Yeah. Well, and I think, so when I was a vegetarian, I swear I was like the white omelet queen, because this was also a time where we were not supposed to eat the yolks and fat was bad. Like, I'm telling my age here, because that's one of the most perfect sources of protein is that egg white. And so you're really only going to get these branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, valine, as you were saying, from these animal sources. And so if you're vegan or vegetarian, you have to be very conscious about where you're getting those. And sometimes you have to supplement. And that's always something when people are like, I want to do this for the planet, I step back and say, I want to think about, is this sustainable for you? How many supplements are you going to have to take? Because when you start consuming lots of supplements and then you've got like all of your powders and we start adding up, also the processed food that you might be consuming, like, is that having the best impact on the planet? And like, we have to weigh that. And sometimes people are like, oh, yeah, that actually makes sense. If I am going to start eating processed food instead, or I'm going to be taking all these supplements, like maybe the trade-off isn't there. But I do think branched chain amino acid supplementation is something that elderly people benefit from, and certainly women who have been under-muscled most of their life. And they, sadly, we used to be like, oh, when we're in our 40s, we are now losing muscle. And in reality, it's when we're in our 30s that we're actually losing muscle. And so if you've been under-muscled, you enter perimenopause and it's like, I need to build muscle mass, especially if you have osteopenia, which is precursor to osteoporosis. We should think about branched chain amino acid supplementation while we bring your diet up as well.
Yeah, I think there's a time and a place for supplements. I agree with you. I also think whenever we're talking about food, it can become a very charged conversation very quickly. And I think the reason why is that everyone eats, right? There are other topics in the health and wellness space where people are okay with letting the experts weigh in, but everyone thinks they're an expert because we all eat. So yeah, I'm really sensitive to the fact that there are a variety of reasons people might choose to be vegan or vegetarian. And that's awesome. And that's great. You can absolutely get what you need and set your body up for success, but you do need to be intentional about it. In terms of supplementation, I actually use an amino acid supplement. I only use protein powder, amino acids, and creatine. Those are the three that I take.
Love creatine.
Me too. It's really changed my life, my energy, and how I feel when I'm at the gym. But for me, those, whether it's BCAAs or amino acids, those help basically give you an insurance policy to make sure that you're getting adequate protein. And people are always confused because when you look at the label, it doesn't say X number of grams of protein.
Yeah.
But that is because when you're eating protein, foods that are high in protein, what you're actually eating is the amino acids that your body then uses the building blocks for protein synthesis. So especially when I'm traveling and I don't know what's going to be on the menu, or I'm stuck in an airport, I find that can be a really helpful stopgap. But yeah, I also don't want people taking like 17 different powders every day. I'm not at all suggesting to use those instead of having a colorful, vibrant diet. There's so many vitamins, antioxidants, minerals, all these good things in food. So please eat those. But yeah, I think it's going to make a difference in how you feel, your energy level, your sleep, and your body composition if you really focus on protein. So I'm on a mission to help women understand that, and just to share my personal experience with how much better I felt when I really focused on it.
Yeah. It's funny because you bring up nutrition, everybody eats. When I was in nutrition school, they were like our introductory, they were like, welcome to like the worst profession you could be in, because everybody's going to want to fight you because it's as emotionally charged as religion and politics to talk about food. And, we had to have a lot of classes on like cultural competency to understand, like, culturally speaking, why do people eat the way they do? And it's really interesting because I see sometimes very just tone deaf posts on the internet. I feel like paleo was definitely a time where people were like, "Oh, nobody can eat white rice. It's horrible for you." I'm like, tell it to the entire Asian population who's outliving you. Like, what? Or being like, corn is like the devil. And I would get into it with people and they're like, your ancestors did not eat corn. I'm like, my ancestors are from Mexico. I guarantee they ate corn. Like, they definitely did. But it can get so emotionally charged because it's like, one, people are trying to find the holy grail of health. And then on the other side, there's like cultural identity, personal identity, like all of these things that go into food. And so I bring that up because if people are listening to this, I mean, especially I feel like vegans don't see this as a diet. They see it as a lifestyle. And I think sometimes people forget that and, people will attack them. And then sometimes they feel, because they get attacked all the time, they feel like any conversation is like, an attack on them. And it's like, wherever you sit in the food paradigm, like take the information that's for you and leave the stuff that's not, and always stay curious. Diets are not meant to be static over our life. We're not meant to always eat the same. And at the same time, sometimes you'll be presented with new information that can be life-changing. And I think for a lot of women, this protein conversation has been life-changing. I'm curious, you said like you share your experience. Tell us like what the journey was.
Yeah, so this is sort of crazy to admit, but even as a journalist who had assigned, written, and edited stories about nutrition, for years I knew protein is very important. I had talked to many nutritionists about it. I don't think I'm alone in this. I think sometimes you have to hear it a bunch of different ways from a bunch of different places until for some reason it just finally clicks. So I grew up in the Midwest, so I eat meat. They tend to be related. So it wasn't like I was meat averse. I certainly wasn't a vegan or vegetarian, but I did grow up in the generation of like low fat, eat pretzels, eat a bagel, cheese, the yolks of eggs, as you said, those are bad. Get the egg white omelet. And I think that's like so hardwired into us, how we're raised, what the media was saying. And so it wasn't until I turned 40 and I started really thinking about my own diet, and looking at, well, Liz, how much protein are you getting? And through more research, and honestly assigning a story to a writer at Women's Health, I learned a lot about the RDA guidelines for protein, and that the guidelines were created based on a study that was done almost 25 years ago on men. And the study actually had nothing to do with health outcomes in that population. It was more about the nitrogen balance in their bodies and how much was going in versus how much was going out. And so the RDA recommendation is essentially created to give you enough protein to stay alive.
Yep.
So that's
all
a problem.
the RDA is like, how do you not die? And it's like, well, there's more to life than being at the bottom level. Like, I didn't come here to place 12th in the Mario Kart race. Like, I want to be the winner. I want to be number one.
Me too. I like to win. And so I think this really coincided also with the pandemic, and I had a little more time. I was more interested in cooking. And also this was around the time that I sort of flip-flopped how much I was running to how much I was strength training. That was based on, I broke my sacrum skiing, so I couldn't run for months and months. Yeah, that's a story for another day. But a lot, like many dark times in our lives, a lot of good came out of it, one of which was protein. So once I decided, okay, let's take a look at how much you're getting. And I was shocked because I was only getting about 40 to 50 grams a day, which the RDA would say is okay for my size. But I am a very active woman. I have 3 children. P.S. I'm also in the perimenopause year, so my hormones are changing. So I definitely needed more. So step 2 was the second week where I started really getting curious about nutrition labels. That's when I started using the food scale and started to track like, okay, well, let's see what happens when I actually dial in and put some more focus on it. And you know what? Even that quickly, I started to feel better. I started to feel more energetic in my daily life. I think the biggest thing I noticed was I just wasn't as snacky in between meals. Now we're going back to those goldfish again. I told you about earlier, but I wasn't reaching for them. I didn't feel like I needed those like little energy boosts during the day. So that was pretty cool. And then in week 3, I decided, okay, I'm going to go for 100 grams of protein, which was still less than what many experts and research suggests I needed. I know there's a kilogram formula out there. I find it easier to talk about gram per pound. So
all people in the U.S. do.
Yes, exactly. I'm not alone. And yet it's so funny how many articles are written and different metrics.
Yeah.
At any rate,
that scientific community being internationally accepted.
I know. At any rate, I need about a gram. You need about a gram per pound of ideal body weight, which for me is around 125 to 135 pounds. So that's how much I aim for. Mm-hmm. But I just made a goal, let's get to 100. That was the level up in week 3. And then week 4 was like, okay, we're going for it. Let's get to 125 or 135. Now, I'm not going to lie, that can be challenging.
Yeah.
Especially in this world where, we don't have options all the time. We were even just talking about food while we're here. You have to be really conscientious about it. But as I went on that journey and progressed each week, my best case scenario really played out. I started to feel so much better. I had more oomph at the gym, more energy. I slept more soundly. All these good things were happening. And then, and I know this is sensitive to talk about, but my reflection started changing in the mirror. Mm-hmm. I started seeing muscle definition. I've been an athlete and an avid fitness person my entire life. It wasn't until I was in my 40s that I noticed I had some like definition in my abs. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be really motivating to see like, wow, something is happening inside my body. It's not just all in my head that I'm feeling, this is more than the placebo effect.
Yeah.
So I just haven't gone back. Of course I have days where I don't hit my goal. That's where, some supplements come in handy. But that's been my experience. What about you? You're eating a lot of protein every day. I know you're obsessed like me.
I mean, when we were doing animal studies and when you saw branched chain amino acids and when you just supplemented with those and the mice, I'm sorry, people, I had no choice in this research. I got into this lab, but to see how different it was, I'm like, wow, like that's substantial. Even in elderly and then like having elderly rats, substantial differences in the muscle mass and the infiltration of fat into those cells. So, my audience was shocked when I had told them, so I'm pregnant right now in the first trimester, which, I have morning sickness. Shockingly, when I set out that I was like, I have to get enough protein. So my bottom of the window is 110. That's the minimum I have to get, 110 grams every day. My audience was really shocked to hear it. And I said, listen, I'm in my 40s and I'm pregnant. My risk of preeclampsia is super high. One of the best ways to prevent that is adequate protein, hydration, magnesium, other things as well. But adequate protein is a must, especially considering that I had endometriosis excision surgery. So I had like a good 3 months. I wasn't really allowed to lift anything heavy. Then it's IVF, embryo transfer. I still fight with my doctor. He's like, no more than 5 pounds. And I'm like, yeah, right. Like, I'm going to lift weights. He's like, you're going to be fine. I'm like, I'm in my 40s. I will not, in fact, be fine. Like, I have seen the research. So I am a big proponent of making sure that you get enough protein to meet your needs. And, I was talking with the audience I spoke to today because they were asking some people say like you need 1.5 grams of protein per pound. And I'm like, yeah, some people do. It depends on what the goals are. It depends on what your health conditions are. It depends on what's going on. And so we have our baseline, which is like a gram per pound of ideal body weight, but there are situations where you might need more. And that's where working with a dietitian, someone that's very specific and individualized to your needs and knowing what is appropriate to you is super, super helpful. But what I was going to say about the first trimester is when I was like, okay, so it's a lot of work to get a lot of protein. And it is hard, I will say, not to use protein powders, to do it all with food alone when your gut is not moving the way it used to because of hormones. But I would wake up in the morning and I would either eat like 4 hard-boiled eggs or I would drink a Chobani yogurt, which was, I will say, I'm not thrilled with the sugar content of it, but with first trimester nausea, it was like, I can get this in and it will stay in. what I found is if I started my day with protein, I could curb the nausea. And I look back at like 2 pregnancies where I was so sick with morning sickness, starting with carbs. We would always tell women, like, carbs in the mouth before your feet hit the floor because it's easy to digest and all this stuff. And I have shared this with other women who have said to me, I actually noticed that in my like 2nd, 3rd, 4th pregnancy, but I didn't want to say anything to anyone because like, that's not what doctors say. That's not what we're told to do. And so I thought like, maybe this is just me. I'm like, have we been getting this all wrong all this time? And so that's something that I'm like, I wish I knew this with my first one because it's helped so much. And as long as I keep, track of the protein, I'm bringing the protein in, I can get through the day. And the nausea is there, but it's doable. It's not overwhelming to me.
That is so awesome. And I wish I had known this during my pregnancies. That
Now
would
I'm
have
like sharing it.
really changed a lot. And, in my dream world, and I know this is very hard because of all the hormones and everything and during pregnancy, but gosh, wouldn't it be cool if there was a study on that and we could really look under the hood and research it? I get asked a lot about, well, I don't need to eat as much protein if I'm not working out that day, right? That's like a really common myth. And it's like, actually, it might be even more important that day because you're not stimulating your muscles through that training. So you need it every day. Consistency is king. And I've really noticed a difference, and it's cool to hear how it's benefiting you during your pregnancy too.
Yeah, what's interesting about that statement is that, especially in perimenopause, it's actually, you might not need as many carbs on the day that you're working out, but you still need the same amount of protein. And I think that we should talk about carbs, right? Because there was definitely, carbs had its moment of being vilified where, women will crave carbs and it's almost like, oh my God, it's this moral failing. Like something's wrong with me. Like I shouldn't be eating carbs. But especially on the days you work out, you're going to have those bigger carb cravings because your body demands the carbohydrates, not just for replenishing glycogen stores, but for building that muscle. But I'm curious, like what was going on behind the scenes, in these health magazines when carbs were like being basically cast as the devil?
Again, I cringe as you say that because it's hard to look back on that time. I think it's a little bit of a case of give the people what they want. This was the, the messaging in society and in culture at that time. Not to say we didn't talk about protein and speak to nutritionists and quote them in articles. I just think above all, it was very calorie focused. I can just remember countless, 1,200 calorie diets that were developed and like steamed chicken and grapes and, just like sad, bland food. And like, it doesn't have to be like that. You can feel so good and still eat flavorful, delicious, colorful foods. But on the point of carbs, they are important. And it's so interesting as somebody who's been in this space for so long, watching the pendulum swing this way and that way. I get asked a lot too, so do you not eat carbs? You just never eat carbs, you only eat protein? And I'm like, no, I need carbs. I need that energy. I work out, I'm active. So I think like the big message here is everything is more nuanced. Nothing is the devil. Let's stop demonizing each other's choices and categories of food. All macronutrients are important, including fat. We need all of them.
So in your time in the women's health editorial space, were there ever trends that were up and coming that you saw and you were like, oh, that's not going to end well?
So many. So many. I vividly remember I'm gonna call them the woo-woo years. And gosh, it started as early, probably it definitely started earlier, but I remember it really started peaking around 2017, 2018. And this was the time when everyone was on juice diets. I had so many friends. Hey, Liz, let's go on a juice diet together. Where you were getting bottles of different colorful juice and drinking like 6 or 8 or whatever a day and not putting any food that you chewed into your mouth. And then there were influencers or whatever they were called back then, purporting that they cured cancer.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
And that scared me. That really scared me to think about people believing that they could just drink a juice and that was going to protect them or heal them from a medical condition that, really needed the support of a doctor to look at their lifestyle factors and potentially medicine, et cetera. But there were a lot of those. Celery juice, that's another juice that just stood on its own for a long time, that it's this like detoxifying thing that's going to like give you an internal shower. That was a big buzzword for a while.
I don't remember hearing that, but that's hilarious.
Your insides do not need a shower. Your kidneys and the rest of your body is taking care of that on its own. Detox was such a huge word. Activated charcoals. It was just this whole time where I think with the rise of social media, just anybody had a platform to get up and to say these things out loud. I also really remember the days when chlorophyll drops were huge. Do you remember that? That they like cured acne, that you would immediately lose weight once you started dropping them in your water. And they were cute and colorful. And I know there have been studies about how there are some benefits. They're small studies, but they're definitely not, they were not going to do all the things that they were purported to in your body. I think forever we're looking for that magic bullet and that hack. And the truth is, besides protein and lifting heavy, it's not a hack, and it does take work. So, from my perspective as an editor, especially when I started leading the team at Women's Health, I had to balance the fact that people are really curious about it. People are talking about it. So the answer is not to bury our heads in the sand because we're like, there's no science to support this and this is bad. If we don't address these topics, that's not helping anyone. We're letting that misinformation be perpetuated. We were also not a brand that was like a takedown brand that, was going to like spend our precious resources to just go to town on somebody and tear it apart. And I say this with love because I love many things about this brand, but Goop, there were a lot of things happening there with vaginal steaming and jade eggs and all sorts of things that were all the rage and people were spending a lot of money on. But what we did is we developed a column that we called Wellness Curious. And that gave us really an opportunity to take things like celery juice, and we did it with other things that have become more popular lately, like cold plunging, and dig in with the leading scientists and really look under the hood at the best research and break it down for people. And then I feel like my job, and I continue to feel this way, is like I would rather you come to a source that cares about science and is going to do the research and talk to the experts. And if you still want to drink celery juice or, whatever the next health craze is, go for it. But at least you're armed with the information to make an educated decision for yourself. So those are a few of them. A lot of them in the nutrition space, I must say. People get really into these quick fixes and magic bullets.
Yeah, the celery juice definitely had its moment. And I remember my audience was like, can you comment on this? And I didn't realize their expectation was like me to endorse it because when I stepped into it and I'm like, look, it's probably not going to be a problem if you drink celery juice. However, if you're someone with endometriosis and you're taking ibuprofen regularly to manage your pain, or you have acne and you're on spironolactone or PCOS and on spironolactone, like if you're on a medication that's potassium sparing and you start drinking boatloads of celery juice, you could end up with arrhythmias. You can end up with problems. And people were so mad at me about it. How dare you say anything negative about celery juice? And I was like, no, but I'm talking about like nutrition drug interactions. And they're like, no, it's food, it's medicine. And I'm like, okay, I am a firm believer in when we can do diet first, let's always do diet first. However, like there are foods, like, if you're on certain medications and you can't be slamming grapefruit juice because of how it's going to change how you metabolize that. Like we have to talk about that. But celery juice really, I remember 2020, we ran out of toilet paper. Like 2019, we ran out of celery in the stores because people were all about it.
Everyone was making celery juice. Yes. And I think you bring up such a good point, which I always try to say in my writing and when I'm talking to women, which is please talk to your doctor. Like keep them in the loop. If you're suddenly going to change to a high protein diet, I also want you to talk to them about that. I get asked a lot from pregnant women about supplementation during that time. I don't feel comfortable advising you.
Yeah.
That can, particularly during such a huge life transition when so many things are happening in your body, like please go talk to your doctor and make a plan together with both of you, bringing your point of view and experience to the conversation.
No, certainly. I mean, I think that is the wisest thing to do. And you brought up the yoni steaming and I remember patients bringing me jade eggs being like, this is gonna cure my menopause symptoms. And I was like, but it's not. I don't understand. And like, is it porous? And how do we source it? I worked in a homeless youth clinic for several years. And because of that, it's always about harm reduction first. If you have someone who's an IV drug user, you can't be like, using IV drugs is bad, okay? Like, no, they're like, I don't care. You have to be like, where are you sourcing things? Where are the needles coming from? Are you doing an exchange program? Like, when you drop things, don't drop from the same cup with everyone's needles in there. And like, it's that kind of harm reduction where you like walk it back one at a time. And so it was a lot of that with like these jade eggs of like, okay, are we sure it's not porous? How are you cleaning it? Like, what is your plan if it goes in and doesn't come out? Like, let's have these conversations. And same with, the vaginal steaming. I have to say the vaginal steaming was one that I was like, which is not your vagina, but it's actually your vulva, because nothing's going inside. And, some people have said like, oh, those herbs are antimicrobial. They're going to disrupt the vaginal microbiome. Nah, no, it's not going inside. That's not going to happen. But, I saw doctors really hating on and shaming women and being like, you're so stupid if you do that and you're going to get a burn. I'm like, women know how to boil a kettle, okay? They're not so dumb that they're just like gonna like scald all their skin off here. But when I looked into it, I was like, this is a whole cultural practice. There is something deeper there that needs to be respected. And if women want to join into that, let's talk about safe ways to do that. But the thing I took issue with is like the claims of like, it will cure your endometriosis, it will cure your infertility. I'm like, whoa. If you want to do it because you want to pamper your vulva, like go for it. You want to relax, there was, I remember having a patient who was a sexual assault survivor, and she was like, part of that practice helped me reconnect to my pelvic floor and my body. And I was like, that's important. Like, wow. Like, this is why I think, listening to patients is so important. I personally had a tear after my second child, and I couldn't get out of pain for nothing with those sutures. I finally was like, I wasn't going to do vaginal steaming, the yoni steaming before because I'm just too lazy, and that sounded like too much work. I was desperate where I was like, my tissue's so uncomfortable. So I was like, I'm going to just try steam. And it was so relaxing and so helpful. And I was like, okay. Like, but the claims, that's where I think we get into problems is that like, not all of these things, like celery juice, that's fine. Celery juice is going to cure Epstein-Barr virus and your thyroid disease. Yeah. I think we went too far with that. And how often do you think that has been happening and maybe also perpetuated by some of these women's health magazines? Not Women's Health itself, but just generally.
First of all, now I desperately want to try steaming my vulva. So thank you. Perhaps a health trend I missed out on. I don't think we did a Wellness Curious article on that. I think it was more just like the trend in general. But, I can't speak for all the brands because I don't know what their reporting process is like and fact-checking process is like. I think and hope they're not perpetuating these claims that like, if you drink this, you won't get cancer or all these, other serious medical conditions that don't have anything to do with juice cleanses or, things of that nature. So I can confidently tell you that Women's Health never perpetuated anything like that. And we tried very hard to see what conversation was happening out there and then to talk to the leading trusted experts, the gold standard in the field, to really parse it out. Honestly, I think a lot's been happening with social media because you can be somebody without a degree or any experience in this space. And if you have a massive following, that gets heard, that gets amplified, and then those people share it with their communities. So I think that's been honestly dangerous in our space. And it's saturated with people. There's an overwhelm of information. And I think also, we're human. We're looking for something to help make us feel better. We want to fix. We want to hear that. We keep talking about celery juice, but we want to hear that celery juice is the answer to all of our prayers. And wouldn't it be amazing if that were true? Again, I'm sure there are brands that were, jumping shark and making very bold and at times untrue claims. But I really hope that any media brand has the integrity to do their research and tell it like it is to their audience.
Yeah. Well, I think, and what you said about Women's Health Magazine not being a takedown brand is really important. I think takedown brands have fueled misinformation more because they have seeded more mistrust and disconnect. So if somebody trusts an influencer and they trust this individual, and who knows what their experience has been that's led them to this, and you come in with like, they're dumb, they're stupid, they're bad, and like, here's how I'm going to take them down, rip them apart. Sometimes that person who feels connected to them, they feel like they need to defend them, or they feel like by proxy, you're calling them dumb. By proxy. And I think that is why we see so much on the internet where people are like, people will say to me, oh, a doctor, I'm not going to trust anything you say. And I'm like, well, fair. You should question everything that's being said to you on the internet. Like, you definitely should. But like, I don't expect just because I have credentials that like, I'm going to appeal to this authority and that you should shut off your brain and accept everything I say. I think that's also been a bit of a problem. But I think the way that you talk about approaching things is such more respect for people's intelligence than what other people are giving them. Like, I don't think takedown kind of content, I don't think it's effective the way you think it's going to be. And I think when you say to somebody, I'm going to present you with the information, I'm going to allow you to make your own decision, it really softens barriers, but it gives them an opportunity to cultivate that critical thinking. And so I just want to say kudos, because I really do appreciate that. You brought up creatine. It feels like creatine's having its moment. Do you feel that way?
Creatine is having such a moment, yes. And we both take it, and so many more women are taking it and talking about it. I did a deep dive post on my Substack into creatine. I have never gone viral on that platform until that story. It was so incredible to me. And yes, it was a lot of men. I gained a lot of new male followers, which is cool. Everybody is welcome. But there were so many women, hundreds of comments. Which is cool for a platform like that where, I'm just starting out, because there's so much interest around that supplement.
In your investigation of creatine, what was some of the most amazing things that you saw about that you were like, wish I knew this 10 years ago kind of information?
Yeah. The biggest one is that it is scientifically proven to give you more energy because of the chemistry of the compound in your body. So that's huge. And who doesn't want to feel like they've got more to give, more effort to put forth when they're working out? And I think, when you're starting a workout plan and you're at the gym and it feels hard and your body's still acclimating to that can be a game changer for people. I did get a lot of questions, and this is interesting because it wasn't my experience. But when you take creatine, your cells hold on to more water. And that's a good thing. That's part of the magic of it. But some people do experience that as a little bit of bloating in their body. And that can freak people out. Again, I don't want to get big. I don't want to get bloated. What I found when I was researching it is that, yes, it does happen. So you're not crazy. I believe you. That does happen to people. But your body does adjust. So be patient. Like many things, you need to take it consistently and allow your body to adjust. I think something I personally dealt with creatine, and this is like many things for many of us in life, is remembering to take it every single day. Because if you don't have that threshold in your body, the creatine that your body doesn't use, and 5 milligrams, or is it 5 grams?
5 grams,
5 grams, thank you.
Dang, those units of measurement again.
I know. Thank goodness you're here. You know what the measurement is? The little scoop they give you.
I know, right?
That's the measurement.
Then they're all 5 grams. By the way, everybody measures out 5 grams.
Exactly. So what your body doesn't use, and by the way, creatine is in foods as well, particularly in, again, animal-based products. So you're putting that in your body, and then what your body doesn't use, it excretes as waste in a compound called creatinine. So your body needs to build up that threshold for it to be able to use it, which means you need to take it consistently every single day. Gosh, there's so many questions about it. people often ask about, well, if I have this medical condition, or I have high blood pressure, or I'm losing, I'm balding, can I take creatine? And to which I say, please talk to your doctor.
Absolutely. It's
please go
way
talk to
too
your doctor.
nuanced for that.
Don't listen to me in my Substack. This is a conversation that you need to have with your healthcare provider.
Yeah. And to your point about bloating, you'll see a lot of people talk about a loading dose of doing like 10 grams for a week. Sometimes the people will say 2 weeks. That's when you're more likely to see that water retention, which I think especially women who are cycling and already experience that like PMS phase, that's something I always caution about. And I'm like, you're better off to do 5 grams every day. And in 2 weeks, you're going to notice a difference. The other thing about it is, I've taken it for years for definitely for, the gains in the gym, basically the like don't fatigue so early. However, brain health has been something really interesting coming out, and seeing, how it affects people with ADHD who struggle to utilize their own glucose in their brain, and what a positive effect it's having in that. And this is, if people are not aware, this is probably the best research supplement that exists.
It is. There are thousands of studies out there. There have been massive reviews by the gold standard journals. So this is definitely a safe supplement. Again, talk to your doctor, but just rest assured that there's so much awesome research about it. And yeah, I completely double tap on what you said about the loading phase and what you're saying about this new emerging research that is really cool. There are also some new studies about its effects on depression and anxiety. There need to be bigger ones, but the results of those studies have been really promising. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the space. I'm also really, really bolstered to see that more studies are being done on women, because most of those studies that exist, the hundreds of them, thousands of them, are done on male populations. But the ones that have been done on women show that it works just as well as us. And no, it's not going to turn you into the Hulk. It's just going to give you extra power when you're at the gym, and probably positively impact your brain health and a bunch of other cool stuff in your body too.
How do you make sure that you get your daily dose of creatine?
So I now have a morning ritual where I'm like, I have to take it first thing. And I put it out by my coffee maker at night, and I've ground my coffee and poured the water in, and so it's just sitting there waiting for me in the morning. And I immediately, upon waking, put it into a big glass with some ice and stir it in. That's also when I put in my essential amino acids, which is the other supplement I take every day. And then I drink that water first thing in the morning, and then I know I'm covered. It's done. There's no study that suggests that there's a particular time of day that works better than others. You don't have to take it right before you work out. Yes, I go to the gym after, but that's not really why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because if I don't remember in the morning, it's not happening. You don't have to take it right after. So take it when you're going to remember. Make it part of your routine, like so many things. Like, other medications you're on or other things that you want to make sure happen that day. My advice is to take it first thing in the morning and to build it into a ritual.
I hate the way it tastes, so I actually mix mine with electrolytes. So I'll do like half an electrolyte pack with the creatine, and I put it in my workout water bottle. That's the way that I will remember it, is I'm just put it in, leave with it, and then in the first trimester of pregnancy, because I've been so bloated, I'm also putting magnesium citrate in there. And I'm like, for people listening, it tastes okay, but there's something about when I'm working out and I'm so thirsty, I'm like, I really don't care, it's wet. I will drink it. It's wet. Please just give it to me. But I think it's important, people hear how to work things into routines, because sometimes, we're talking about benefits of things, we're talking about dosages of things, but then, especially you have 3 kids. It's like, well, where does this go in my day? How do I make this happen?
Yeah. And I think, speaking of trends in the health space, that's something I saw too. It's like, there are always new awesome studies, new products. And it's like, well, how much time do we have in our days?
Yeah.
It's a full-time job optimizing your health.
Yeah.
The ones we're talking about, they're actually not going to take you that much longer. Taking the scoop, 5 grams, and putting it in your water bottle or your glass first thing in the morning is pretty easy. That's pretty low lift. So yeah, it shouldn't break you. It shouldn't feel like a huge extra thing. And in fact, most of the good stuff happens through just lifestyle decisions and behaviors every day.
Mm-hmm. You have a daughter, correct?
Yes.
I'm curious, knowing how we've been influenced, there was the fat-free, there was the don't do carbs, there was the earn your food, there was the don't get too bulky, but also don't take up too much space. All of these things that I feel like media in general has negatively impacted women. As a mom, how are you thinking about that for your daughter?
Yeah, well, first things, when I landed at Women's Health, I made sure we never did cover lines that said like how to lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks, or, get a bikini body in X amount of time. I think those are very damaging. I think words matter. And I certainly internalized those growing up. I feel really lucky that I didn't ever navigate an eating disorder, but I also credit that I was so focused on my sports. But I recognize these are, especially young women, kids, people my daughter's age, she's 14, they're very, very impressionable.
That is, I remember when I was 14, how many of my friends were doing water fasts, trying to lose weight.
Heart.
Yeah. I've always had the problem of I like food too much. I couldn't do the juice diets or anything because I was like, no, but I like eating.
I too love eating. It's one of the great joys of life. But just to take it really personal and into my own space, I think about that every day when I'm talking to my daughter, and particularly how I'm talking about my own body in front of her, and just honestly when I'm not in front of her, so that I'm consistently building this messaging. And as somebody who likes to go to the gym and gets really fired up when I get a really heavy deadlift day, or, I told you about how I started noticing some ab definition when I changed what my nutrition looked like every day. I never want to say things like that to Lucy to make her think that, like, if it's not that, then it's not good. Mm-hmm. That to be better, I need to be smaller. So I really focus on celebrating her effort. She loves to play tennis, and I never talk about her body. Mm-hmm. We do talk about like conditioning, or, I got really tired in my match, and we can talk through some things she could do so that she feels like her endurance is better. But it's not about her body. She's at such a vulnerable, impressionable age. And honestly, we all are for the rest of our lives. It's like, I'm still vulnerable. So that's what it means for me. I think words and visuals really, really matter. And so we were so careful and meticulous about that at Women's Health. Oh my goodness, the way we labored over cover lines and headlines, and really to come at these topics, one, without the assumption that the person reading it needs or wants to change. Like, my goal was always to give you a high five for where you're starting, and to be curious enough to get more information and to think about new things you might want to do. So high fives to you wherever you are, if you're listening on your journey. And if you do want to make a change, we're here to provide the best science-backed information. And so the wording, the visuals, they reflected the diverse array of ways that health is embodied, in different types of women, different shapes and sizes, different ages, cultural backgrounds, all the things that I hope every brand is thinking about, but it really mattered to us. And to really come at everything from a place of like empowerment and strength, because ultimately that's what I want women to believe in their heart of hearts, that they are strong. And I want Lucy, my daughter, to believe that too.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're being so conscious with it. I have boys, and I think a lot about how I talk about my body and the things that I say as well, because I'm like, in the future, they will be in partnership with somebody, and I don't want them to have, these negative ideas about their body or their partner's body. And my oldest is 12, and he's starting to notice people's body composition. And what's been really interesting is that he makes this observation, and I thought, oh God, is he like making a judgment about how they look and how they influence that? But he's coming from a place that he sees people's body composition, and he's like, he feels sad that he's like, I'm not going to get as much time with them if like they're not taking care of their body, Mom. And I'm like, what an interesting way. But then we also have to talk about like, okay, but we like aren't going to comment on people's bodies and go through all of that. Yeah, he one time had a nanny who he really liked. She disclosed she had diabetes and she was eating like a cinnamon roll for lunch. And he was like, you can't eat that. That's not good for you. That's going to harm you. And she got really upset. And she was like, he's judging me about my food. And I was trying to explain to her, like, he likes you and he cares about you deeply. And then I had to have a conversation with him of like, sometimes even when you know something's better for someone else, you don't say anything. Like, you only give opinions that are asked for, especially as a man. You can't grow up and do that. But I was like, man, because he would do podcast interviews and he'd sit outside the room and listen. So he's like, heard the advice that I'm giving. And he's like, people just want to be given advice on how to live their life. And I'm like, child. You may know that, but we don't comment on people's plates. We don't comment on people's grocery carts. We don't comment on people's decisions in their life. And we also don't give unsolicited advice to people. But I think it's such a time to be a parent, to navigate all of this. And I think about how it's like, well, reading magazines in the library like influenced me in this way. But now we've got social media. Is your daughter on social media?
She is.
Tell us how you're navigating that, because you're ahead of me on the road. So I'm like, give me the tips.
Well, tip number one is to wait as long as possible to give them a phone. If I could go back in time, I would have waited longer. For us, my husband and I, so Lucy has a twin brother, Charlie, and when they started riding a school bus in middle school to their school, it's a 30-minute drive away. We wanted to be able to know where they were and have them reach us in case of, they needed a ride or emergency, all those things. What happens is when they have the phone, of course, they get access to apps, the internet. And we've made a decision to limit their screen time by setting up all the parental controls. Yeah. Now, I will tell you, kids are really good at hacking that stuff. It's like terrifying.
I literally talked about that in my talk today, where I was like, as moms, we aren't sleeping because they're babies. And then, that kind of continues until toddlerhood. And then you get this like down period. And then you have teenagers. And I'm like, when I was a teenager, it was like, oh, my parents are worried. Is she up reading a book at night? And now we have to be like, did they hack the Wi-Fi and escape the parental controls and be able to like get on YouTube in the middle of the night and watch God knows what?
That's exactly right. These are the things that keep me up at night as well. We have our kids, they all have to check in their devices. And I also have a 10-year-old son, and he does not have a phone, but he's like counting down till he gets his phone. And I'm like, I don't know, George, it might be a little different from you knowing what I know now. I think those parental restrictions on when they can access it are helpful. There's nothing that gives me nightmares more than imagining my kids in bed in the middle of the night watching YouTube videos or TikTok. Yeah. They all use Snapchat to text with one another. Like, they use that as much as they do the texting apps.
I know, this is like back in the day when we were on like Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Poking each other.
Yeah. And I think, to take it to an adjacent topic, yes, of course, they're seeing these influencers and filters and the way people are manipulating their body. And of course, we know, even if you're not using any of those tools, if you're a human, if you're posting something on the internet or to a social media app, I use Instagram. If you took 5 pictures, of course you're going to choose the one where you look the best, And so we all have to keep that in mind. And I talk to my kids about that. It's such a curated version of reality. It's not real life. It's a picture, a moment in time that somebody selected because they felt their best. It doesn't represent the whole person and everything that's happening behind the scenes. But I'm in it with that. And I think at the end of the day, the best I can do as a parent is to continue to nurture their sense of like, be kind to people. That food, speaking of food again, I talk a lot about the nutrients in it, the macronutrients. They're like, they roll their eyes. You told that story about your son and your nanny. My son, Charlie, talked to his health teacher at school about how she needed to give more lessons about protein. Yeah. So it's like,
well, they
are listening.
They have these lessons that you're not even giving them directly, which I think part of that is highlighting like the way we talk to ourselves, the way we live our lives is speaking far more than the words we're saying to them.
Yeah, amen to that. And I think something I could definitely improve on as a parent is that I am on my computer and my phone a lot. That's just like part of my job, even in this new chapter of mine. And I think we have to do our best to model the behavior that we hope our children adapt. So, no phones at dinner, of course. Not of course. Plenty of people do that. So how we speak to ourselves, how we talk about ourselves in front of them. And if it's things like screen time and app usage, it's not great for us either as adults. So it's a lot being a parent, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is, especially being a modern parent. There's so much to be thinking about all the time. You brought up curation. Did Women's Health magazine ever Photoshop their models?
This is something I'm really proud of. We did not do Photoshopping.
Nice.
And I will tell you, we had celebrities, talent that we shot that was disappointed because we didn't. And that's how, common it is in the space that they would just assume you're going to make my stomach flatter or perk up my butt or whatever. And we're like, no, we chose you because we love you just as you are.
Yeah.
Having said that, there is, if anybody out there is a photographer, you do know that there can be issues with like shadows or lighting. So I'm not saying we published completely raw pictures.
But you weren't like cutting waist,
we
trimming
were
thighs.
not cutting waists or trimming thighs. I was about to tell you a story, which I'm not going to tell you. But
cut the cameras now.
But no, that was really, really important to us. And I'll sort of give you a taste of it. I've seen people that we photographed for Women's Health that I have been on set and seen them, and they are beautiful, strong, awesome women. And then I saw how other brands portrayed them when they did their own photo shoots with them. So I know how common it is out there. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I actually brought it up in my talk today. Photoshop ruined women's mental health and their image of themselves. Body image is one of the main reasons why we don't feel worthy of love and pleasure, why we have a hard time getting in the mood, why we get thrown out of the mood because we're worried so much and so self-conscious. Let everybody know, I'll let everyone know right now, if anyone is lucky enough to have sex with you, they are not thinking about your cellulite, your rolls, or what you look like in any position, because literally their hormones have overridden their brain. It doesn't work that way. But then I was like, first we had Photoshop and that kind of ruined everything. And now we have AI. And I was like, the AI imaging is the worst thing to happen to anything. It's come to Pinterest. And we were looking for a haircut for my son. And he was like, all these men are AI, Mom. I don't want a haircut like an AI. I'm like, yeah, it's weird, right? And then I saw AI food and I was like, ew, what is happening here? Can we have real things? And I'm like, I swear in the next generation, they're going to reject all of this and be like, this is all ick and weird. Why were you guys not just real with yourselves? Because we had to reject everything our parents did.
Yes, indeed. Well, what's interesting when you're talking about photo shoots and Photoshop, so step one is, at a photo shoot for any of these media brands, they have lights on them. They've been in hair and makeup for maybe hours. They have tried on a whole rack of clothes. They have a photographer and team behind the camera directing them into their best position. So you start with that. And then next level, you Photoshop it. These are not authentic models of what women look like. So please, everybody, keep that in mind. When you mentioned AI, I just saw this. Sadly, it was served to me, but because the algorithm knows I'm into fitness and health, so a lot of fitness stuff pops up. There was an account that was entirely AI women, with ideal bodies in their sports bras and short shorts, and they were fake. They were just fake women, and then thousands of comments of people just crushing on them and saying inappropriate things. And I felt physically nauseated looking at that because they look real. They look like they're real women, and they're not. They're
so bizarre. Why are we not doing that with more men? I wonder. But it is so bizarre because also, there have been surveys and there have been studies where they show men these photoshopped images and then they show real women and they opt for real women. But when they show them to women, women opt for the Photoshop. And it says so much about conditioning. It's, I remember when I was, maybe in high school, I remember being at a friend's house and there was this PSA commercial of a model and she showed they showed her full makeup, everything done. And then they started taking off her makeup. taking off the tape that was taping her, taking off the wig, and they like stripped it all down and like showed you like what was real. And that was like kind of our like after school kind of special of like this is what's reality. And I remember seeing that, and I'm reminded of it in this conversation and being like, that was really powerful to see, because as little girls, we were like, oh my gosh, I have to try to achieve these things. This has been a super insightful conversation. It's been so great to chat with you. I'm curious if there's one thing that you're like, hey, in 2025, this is my message that you're going to see it on my Substack and I'm going to be preaching about, but also that I think is so important for women to embody. What would that be?
Well, we've talked at length about strength training and protein, so I'll keep beating those drums. But I would just say to stay curious and choose your own adventure in this space, but please continue to educate yourself with science-backed information. There's so much power in you taking charge of your own life, but doing it with resources that will power you forward. And I hope that any woman out there, as she begins to make some tweaks and experimenting and goes on her health adventure, that she takes a minute to reflect on how she's feeling and celebrates the hard work of trying, because that's a big deal.
I would regret if I don't ask you one more question, because you brought up pursuing science-backed information. We talked about misinformation. How can women navigate the space to know not what is just true, but is also true for them as they're presented with these wild trends, not only from magazines, but social media influencers? You've had a lot of experience in this. So break it down for us. Like, what should women know and do?
I would advise you to be cautious of anybody who is really strong on one side or the other. A polarized viewpoint is, to me, a red flag. That, to me, is a person that does not have an open mind. Most scientists or influencers or luminaries in this space will tell you when their knowledge is incomplete, and they will also be open to changing their mind when more research and science comes out there. So I would be really careful in that content that you're consuming to find people who tell you the nuances of the research and the study, and don't come down like, 110% on one side and leave no room for any other part of the conversation. And I would also take the time, if you see an interesting study name-checked on social media or in an article, you can do the research yourself. You can go to Google Scholar and plug in that topic and quickly find what the research is. Now, I know not everybody out there is a trained journalist, but one level up tip, if you are going to take that step, and I hope you do, is to see if that research has been supported by any organization, right? So if you hear a study about how peanuts are the best thing under the sun and you will live to 200 years old if you start eating a cup of peanuts every day. I don't know why I picked that. Maybe I'm wanting peanuts tonight.
Peanuts were vilified, okay? They also
vilified.
had their like hater moment.
They did. Every food has. If that study was funded by the Peanut Board, that's something to keep in mind. So beware of overly strong, overstated opinions, and curate your feed too. If you find somebody who you're iffy about, or if you find that their opinions are veering in that direction, I would advise you to mute them or even unfollow them and stick to the ones who have that open mind and who really do believe in science. I think that's the most important thing. I think there's a lot of people out there talking about their personal experience and anecdotes, which is awesome. I just did it in this podcast as well. But you need to look under the hood. One person's experience does not mean that you're going to have the exact same one. And they might have ulterior motives in sharing that experience.
Yeah. I love everything you shared. Something that I tell people do is that if you're not trained in interpreting science, this is where I do endorse it. You can take that journal article, if you can download it, you can upload it into something like ChatGPT, and you can build out your chat first to say, okay, act as a scientist. What are the most important questions that you should ask anytime you're analyzing an article? You can put it in and then have it ask all that. You can also put it in and say, what are the limitations of this study, first and foremost? What are the conflict of interest? So that's what you're talking about, who funded this study. You can ask, what are all the problems of this study first, which sets it up so that when it interprets it fairly. Then you can say like, okay, what were the findings of this study? Who does this actually apply to? And if you're curious about yourself, you can say, I am X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. Would this study apply to me, or would more data need to be done? And then you can also ask questions of, has this been validated in other studies? Has it been cited other places? Like, you can go deeper and start asking these questions. And I think in this way, it makes it easy for the average individual to start to understand science better and start to understand how to ask these questions. They don't have to read a whole, study. They can start asking those things. But when you start with what are the limitations, and it spits back that like, this was a sample size of like 12 people, red flag right there. Like, this was a jump off study. This wasn't a robust enough study for us to make inferences about a whole population. And so I think it's hard to navigate the science, but what you said about the red flags are very polarizing. People, if they're standing in a grocery store, odds are we're not going to get a good, like, fair take on it these days. You know, we see these, like, certain pieces of content out there. And what you said about, like, unfollowing, like, you can train your algorithm. And I want people to keep in mind the algorithm will never serve you up nuance or what most scientists say, which is it depends. It will always serve you up polarizing and emotionally driven content, most of the time meant to enrage you, because that's what keeps you stuck on there. And if you see something you don't like it, you can block somebody, or you close the app altogether, and it actually tells the app, I hated that so much, I left you. And the algorithm freaks out. That's like one thing that the algorithm never wants to see. And you learn this. I have to say that I learned that through a TikTok training as a creator, where they told us, if someone watches your video and they abandon the app, your video is not getting shown to anyone, because that's like a kiss of death for it. And I'm like, oh, great. So when I see a piece of content where someone's being like really hateful, or they're trying to ruin my hormones for the profit of Meta, I'm leaving the app altogether, and I will train. And my algorithm now is mostly just showing me food content these days. There's like, if we show her baking, she's going to be happy. I'm like, yeah, fair. Okay, I'll watch that.
I love that. I am served many dogs, and I never close the app on a dog. So there's that.
Same.
That's an awesome tip. I had never heard that. That's really, really good to know. And awesome tip too on ChatGPT. I use it a lot actually in my reporting, just to like gather all the studies, and then I'm digging in and reading them. But it's so helpful. I think like a big theme today is like, you have agency, do some research. And I love that it depends. That's the word or phrase I was looking for. I worry about people who are out there spouting information and don't leave room for it depending.
Mm-hmm. And I think just encourage everyone, you are smart enough to go in and think for yourself and start reading this information, but you have to source multiple sources. This has been such a great conversation. I could literally talk to you for hours. We're going to have, like right now, we're in middle America, Midwest specifically, in the Ozarks, where I'm like, we saw each other in LA. I'm like, next time we're going to have to do this again. Everyone can leave comments of like, what more should we ask her? What have you like been dying to know? Because I'm like, we could literally talk for hours.
Well, maybe next time you'll come to the East Coast, and by then I'll have a podcast so we can do it all again. But thank you for your really fun questions. It was really fun to go down memory lane with my editorial career.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If this is the kind of content you're into, then I highly recommend checking out this.